The following podcast is a W2M Network original production. Visit W2Mnet.com for all of our other great podcasts, plus news, reviews, articles, and opinions from the worlds of wrestling, video games, football, and entertainment.
Just when you thought it was safe to blow the whistle. Wait a minute, what? Anyway, yes, you're not dreaming, hallucinating, bad trip, whatever you want to call it. We are back. This is indeed the latest edition of Soccer to the Max. Fearless leader and awesome producer Sean, not with us tonight, but do not fear, this is only a temporary deal, but you do have myself, Eric Watkins, and naturally, with the summer of soccer fast approaching on us, quicker than the oddball that is the 3-6-1 formation, which, yeah, Greg, you and I are going to have to talk about that. Not alone, obviously here, the wonderful, multifaceted, highly talented Rachael McCreever.
Oh, I'm blushing. What an introduction. Thank you. It's good to be back. And I'm excited for our topic today.
Yes, indeed, you should be. First of all, introductions are what I do. I almost rival Pat McAfee. I learned from the best. But while we're here, past the introduction phase, yes, the summer of soccer is nigh. We are, at the time of recording, 36 to 48 hours-ish from the beginning of the Women's World Cup, and, this side of the pond, there's been a lot of intrigue as far as the U.S. being favorites. Are we not really? What's going on? But there will come a day where we will talk about the women's national team and Jill Ellis and everyone. But to start things off, as we do, we've got a couple of groups tonight, naturally including the host nation, Les Bleus Féminines. Yeah, I will say, they do make me a little bit nervous.
And they should. They're such a good team. There's so much talent. They've got a great mixture of young, old, veteran, and just young players who are already veterans in their own way because of not only just their national team appearances, but with their appearances in France and abroad. And, oh my gosh, like, they're hosting. There's obviously all kinds of pressure on the host. There's a little bit more pressure to France, too, because there's never been a team in the history of the Women's World Cup that had their men win the year before and then the women's team win the next year. France won in 2018 in Russia, so there's a real possibility that they could win the whole thing on their own home turf. And, I mean, they beat the U.S. 3-1 earlier this year. Those are good-looking odds.
I can definitely see why they're co-favorites, and not just being what could be the first ever nation to go back-to-back men's and women's World Cup, but also kind of propel the momentum. Imagine if we get a 3-year stint where we have France winning men's World Cup, women's World Cup, and the men's Euros all consecutively. And when you have a team, especially the star power like Eugénie Le Sommer, you can lead the charge and kind of make that happen.
Yeah, totally. I mean, France just has this whole giant boatload of talent. Don't forget Wendy Renard in the back. She's a huge presence, and quite literally, because she is very, very tall. I believe she's 6 foot, if I am correct, but I'm double checking that. She's 6'2", actually. She is the tallest player in the Women's World Cup this year. They have such a talented team. A lot of their players are at home in France. There's a couple, one in England, one in Spain. But other than that, I mean, this is a team that gels together really, really well.
I just had to look at that sink in. 6'2"?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She is a tall lady.
Yeah. Okay, gonna leave aside what I was going to say for another show. Moving on to this one. So, with this, everything that's facing in it's hyping up, oh, if France wins their group, which, let's face it, they're favorites easily to win their group, but it's setting up, oh, France-US quarterfinal, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I like that France not only is talented, but if anything, they're keeping quiet. We seem to be the ones doing a lot of the talking and speculating on this. That makes me wonder, it's like, we've got a bit of a sleeping giant situation.
Yeah, I think it's nervous speculation, too. There's a lot of talk of, oh, well, there's a real opportunity that France and the United States could face each other in the quarterfinals. It's like, okay, take a step back. Yes, it's very likely that it's like 99.9% set in stone that the United States is going to make it into the knockout rounds. But with that match against Sweden, you never know. That's going to be the match that really decides the group, and it's the final match for both teams in the group stage. Mm-hmm. So there's all this speculation, but you gotta get out of the group. You gotta win the group first. Let that happen. Focus on France whenever you get to France. Quit speculating. Just play the game. Focus on I don't care that the United States beat Thailand 9-0 almost 4 years ago. I want to see what they can do against them now. I think there's too much nervous speculation, but as there should be in a way, like the media can do it all they want, the team can't do that.
Yeah, and it's just, okay, everybody's talking about our depth for good reason. I mean, looking at France's group, they've got not only the depth of their team, but they've got a pretty easy path. We're talking Norway, which, looking in my eyes, could, even with all the controversy, which we'll get to in a second, it's still their trickiest game. And then Nigeria and South Korea. I mean, yeah, magic number you could say is 7, but let's face it, France is really gunning for 9 points in this group stage.
And it's very possible that they'll get it.
Now, I mentioned Norway, and you and I were talking earlier. How can I best say this? You haven't gotten the kindest or most intelligent of tweets in reply to your stance on the Ada Hegerberg situation, which, reading on it myself, I think she's got not only a very legitimate platform, timing-wise, but a very legit idea. But let me take a step back and have you explain to our dear listeners a bit more what's going on and how you find yourself suddenly kind of on the fringes of this.
So, Ada Hegerberg is, she is sitting out of the World Cup, which is a incredibly big decision. I mean, she is the best player in the world right now. She won the Ballon d'Or, FIFA Women's World Player of the Year. She is at the peak. I think she's only 23 too, so she's super young. She's sitting out of the World Cup, not featuring with Norway, because, and people don't think this is what it's about, but it is, it's about inequality. It is about, I'm going to take a quote from that she said, speaking to reporters in Lyon. She said, quote, "I was really honest with the national team representative. What I felt wasn't good enough, what my experience had been since youth with the national team. I wanted it to be a relationship between me and them so they could take the feedback and do something with it. I have no thoughts about giving that to all the people. I think it's a good way to deal with things, to be honest, and honesty is the right way for development. I've done my feedback. It's up to them to do what they want to do with it. I've never been trying to control the starting 11 or something internal with the group. This is a feeling that's based on my whole experience with the national team. It's not even up to me anymore. I've moved on in my career and my life. I was sharp in what I meant with them. I don't really have a reason to share that with anyone else." The big deal here And she also went on to say, I always respected men's footballers for what they earn. The gap is enormous, but at the same time, you need to give young women and girls the same opportunity as men. That's where we need to do the change. And yet people, which is funny because it's mainly men who are telling me it's not about inequality. And I think that in itself is just so extremely poignant, that it's the men saying it's not about inequality. That's something that men are, correct me if I'm wrong here, since you are a male, are really never going to have to deal with in their lives, especially in sports. I mean, if you qualify for the U.S., in the U.S., if you qualify for the World Cup, you get a bonus. If the women did that, no way. The gaps are so enormous, and they're enormous in Norway, and she is protesting the inequality in Norway, around the world, and she just really wants women's football to be respected, as she should. And so for her to really, really take a stand, it kind of, you have to like make the parallels to Ada and the U.S. women's national team who are filing that lawsuit. And it's like, wow, she literally just stepped out of a whole tournament, the biggest tournament in the world. It's like, hey, U.S., what's your next move? Obviously, I don't really think there's too much competition there because they're vying for the same goal, and that same goal that they're vying for is great, and it should be done on every platform in every nation. Just for her to step away from the World Cup, like the biggest tournament in the world, is truly an amazing, incredible thing. Nobody told her she had to do this. Nobody told her she couldn't go to the World Cup. I'm sure Norway would love to bring her there. But she made the decision on her own to protest this inequality because it truly isn't fair.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. Being a man, I could go right now all kinds of recreational leagues, lower tier professional leagues. There's this gigantic infrastructure set up for me, or even my nephew if he would decide to get into soccer. Everything is laid out for him. You got the talent, you can make, starting just out, thousands and eventually millions of dollars if you're good enough. But for women of all ages, skill level, things like that, it's just not there. I mean, you take a look at the biggest men's tournaments, and you're talking about a decade's gap before the equivalent women's tournaments were even created, and that are now just starting to thrive. So I see the point entirely, and again, on the heels of the U.S. women's national team filing the lawsuit, U.S. women's hockey players basically boycotting until they get a more solidified elite level professional league, almost not playing world championships because of this pay structure. These same issues going across sports, across countries. More and more women, deservedly, rightfully so, are stepping up in every single way that they can to get that voice heard and to make a bigger impact. And honestly, I salute her for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really, really have to tip your hat for it. It's something I mean, it's the biggest tournament in the world, of course. Men's, women's, you name it. It is the biggest tournament in the world, and for her to take a step back and be like, no, I'm not competing in this. I don't care how good the chances are if I compete in this. I don't care if, I mean, she's already with the best club in the world, but hypothetically thinking, say that she wasn't, oh, I don't care who could see me and who could pick me up from this. It's a big decision for a player like this.
Yeah, and for something like this, yeah, take this time, being on the biggest stage, get yourself noticed, because at a minimum, you are creating a big discussion on a topic that needs to be solidified. And again, it's not like this will be her only World Cup, hopefully. She stays healthy, stays on this level, and we're talking in 2023, she'll be 27, really at like the peak of her thing. So she will look back on this as everyone should and say, hey, this was a defining moment, and then all of a sudden she'll be in for, you could say, a quasi-redemption. And believe me, Norway, they're going to take a big step back because of it, but it's for a very good reason.
And I think Norway will do fine without her, and that's nothing against Ada Hegerberg, but, I mean, they qualified there for a reason. I mean, the competition in Europe is stiff, and they do have a relatively, I mean, Nigeria, I think, is a huge wild card. I think South Korea is a big wild card, but in terms of their group, I think they could make it, whether they're the second or third place team. So I don't think that there's going to be this giant upheaval of, oh, they don't have her, so they're going to lose all 3 games. I mean, they very well could, because Nigeria and South Korea are also quality teams, but I don't think that there's going to be this whole, oh, it's just because she's not there. It's probably because the other teams are better.
Exactly, and they can still eye 4 points, and as you said, that could be enough for either runner-up or best third, all things considered, but no matter what, it's still going to be this, well, what if? And have this kind of a spotlight looked on, and it's like, well, even if they go ahead, make the knockout round, and say they even advance to the quarterfinals themselves, it's like, well, you could have done X, Y, Z had you listened and had she played and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, it's a huge, sticky situation, and you're always going to have those people that are like, no, it's wrong because I think it's wrong, and that's just not the case. Speaking to you, Twitter.
Oh, Twitter. That's why I use it for certain reasons. Look, you mentioned Nigeria. They have, like, some of their glory days looking back on that 99 tournament, and they're one of the teams that has been part of every Women's World Cup, but for everything they accomplished many, many moons ago, where are they now? It's like, this is a team you don't know a whole bunch about, and to me, they're a little bit hard to predict.
Yeah, they're a huge wild card team. I think they're a team. I mean, there's a big shift when it comes to European style football to African style football. I think African style is a lot like the Latin American style, very free, very very fast paced. But I think what advantage they have is obviously just like the Latin American, the Central American, the South American countries, is there's a lot of heat, and they're okay with the heat. They're adjusted to the heat. I don't know how hot it gets, in France, but it could get hot, and they're okay with that, and they're still gonna, maybe in the heat, teams like the United States and England and maybe even France, they might not be as physical, but these African and these like the Americas teams, they're not afraid to be physical just because the weather might be bothering them. I think there's a lot of advantage and disadvantage they have. I think not knowing a lot about them can be a really good advantage, though.
And the good news is, although sometimes in some parts of France, especially around Paris, they can deal with some heat waves to where it'll be 80, 85, sometimes 90 degrees. And most of the time, you're looking at about mid-60s, around 70 this time of year. So that could make things maybe a teeny bit trickier. But if anything happens, well, as you say, Nigeria is definitely well conditioned to the task.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're a huge wild card team, and we'll just really have to see what happens. I mean, they're not a team to sleep on, though. They're the Super Eagles. They're like the Super Falcons or something. They have a great nickname.
Not to mention, they're keeping the trend alive with their kits. I mean, come on, I can't beat
They're
those.
awesome.
Now, with South Korea, when everybody talks about Asian women's soccer, you automatically think, oh, Japan and blank. South Korea, they're trying to make their point known and kind of failing in that blank a little bit, showing, hey, this is what we can do, this is what we've already done, we're ready to take a step up. But I don't think they have the right group really to do that this time around.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they barely squeaked by in 15 to the knockout rounds, but I don't know about this time. I just think that Nigeria, despite not knowing much about them, I think that they could squeak into that third place spot. And ultimately, a game like South Korea versus Nigeria, it doesn't look sexy on paper at all. But I think that's a game that you're going to want to look out for to see, because 4 of the 6 third-place teams will end up making it to the knockout rounds. So I feel like whatever team it is, they have a good chance of making it to the knockouts. So that's going to be a game that you might want to keep your eyes peeled for.
Oh, definitely. And that one's going to be one of the earlier matches on the 12th. And yeah, that one, I mean, both teams would probably settle for a draw, but they're really going to go all out because, hey, those clutch 3 points going into that final match day of the group, you're right, that could decide, hey, could we play this and get that boost into the third place?
Oh, sorry, I cut out there. We'll just have to see. Like I said, South Korea is also a team that I think they were very overlooked in 2015. They're not up with, as you mentioned, the Japans, the Chinas, Australia, Brazils of the world. So there's definitely going to be a little bit of bypass for sure. But also in a way that helps them because then not many people really know about them. So it'll be interesting.
Well, definitely a couple of good underdog stories to kind of look out for. So Group A isn't the group that you should really just automatically throw away. There could be a lot of very developing storylines.
Group A is kind of like, France is going to make it out, but who is going to join them?
Exactly. Now, Group B, Germany, China, Spain, South Africa. This is another one of those where it's that quasi kind of group of death feel, because we know about Die Fraulein Mannschaft, we know about China, but Spain and South Africa, just like Nigeria, South Korea, they're those kinds of, hey, proving that they exist themselves.
Oh, I think this is 100%, for me, the group of death. I think that there's so many question marks and there's so many good pieces on all of these teams that really, really, really have a chance to maybe surprise. I think Germany, you look at it and it's like, okay, Germany has to go through unless something catastrophic happens. I mean, remember, there's no Cecilia Sausage anymore. Nadine Angerer isn't there anymore. But Jennifer Marzon, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, she is a total beast with Lyon, and now you have to see, okay, with Lyon, will that carry over to the World Cup?
And it's always those things, because it's great timing. You're just coming off of what, in a lot of these cases, are fantastic club seasons, especially when you make your runs in the Champions League. But you're right. Okay, you have your new generation. They've shown what they can do with their club. Can they match that with their country? And for their first major tournaments like this, it's always tricky.
Yeah, I think it's very tricky, especially when you have a new look team. I think Germany has a lot to live up for in the sense that they won the tournament 2 years in a row, and they're the only team that has ever done that before. And I mean, granted, this is only the 8th World Cup, but still, that's a pretty big deal. I think this group is really something to look out for. China's a new-look team. South Africa has a lot of really young players that could really just go out there and crush it. And Spain has a lot of youngsters, too. They held their own against the United States pretty well. They lost, but, I mean, they held their own pretty well, and they've done well in friendlies. They upset the Netherlands 2-0, I believe.
Yeah, and that's the thing, especially for these European teams. There was a lot more intense competition, and there were a lot of shock results even for this Women's Euro tournament. So, just like we were talking about in Group A, Spain is just that ultimate, hey, they could create some magic of their own in Group B. It wouldn't surprise me if they're right there, second place, or maybe even winners going against Germany because of the familiarity. Who knows?
Big old question mark.
And you were mentioning it's like with South Africa, it's like they've got a very good mix of both young talent and veterans. And it's like, they're emerging. They don't mind stepping up and playing the big competition, but it's not always the best result.
Mm-hmm.
So
Inconsistencies.
yeah, it's like, alright, you have these fantastic competitive matches, but then again, you go up against Norway, you lose 7-2, so it's like, what are you really thinking about, you know?
Right. And I mean, I think still this is such a wide open tournament that, I mean, let's be real. Even me, and, you know, I'm from the country, I never thought Russia would beat Spain. I mean, who would have ever thought that would happen? The World Cup is full of just endless question marks and possibilities.
Oh, indeed, and that's why we love it so much. I think if the first 3 groups that we're covering tonight, this one is going to intrigue me the most, because it is just that level of, especially with me, unfamiliarity to the point that, while yes, it is arguably the group of death, it's like, okay, that makes it even more fascinating. It's like, alright, let's see what's going to happen and what everybody's going to be talking about the next day.
Yeah, and who can be that team that steps up and takes any of the spots? I don't know if you look at this group and see, hey, there's a real winner there.
I mean, it's true. Normally in years past, you would say, oh, Germany won, China too. But I mean, who knows? It could be one of those things to where, as I said, Spain may wind up winning the group. South Africa could sneak in as one of the best third-place teams. And one of your 2 more traditional giants could finish in the cellar and be knocked out. And then what?
Mm-hmm. It'll be a fun group to watch.
Definitely. And finally for tonight, Group C. This, if you've got your group of stars, this is at the very least one of them. You've got Australia, Italy, Brazil, and Jamaica. Uh-oh.
Oh man, the poor reggae girls. Oh Lord.
And the reggae boys are playing tonight, and then the girls are coming off the scene. This performance is doing this. I just feel bad, because it's like, okay, you're finally here, but Titans, off you go.
Pretty much. I think in this group, your big dark horse, you know, it's crazy to say it, but Brazil is one of them because of just how inconsistent they've been. But my gosh, you really have to look out for Italy. I mean, they haven't qualified for the World Cup since 1999. This is only their 3rd World Cup. In 2019, they have won every single match but 2, and they drew both of those. So they haven't lost in 2019 yet. They've played some interesting opponents. They won against Chile, who's going to the World Cup. They won against Wales, who isn't going to the World Cup. A big 5-0 victory over Mexico. So on and so forth. There's a couple teams that are in, a couple teams that are not in. Ironically, the 2 teams that they drew with are not going to the World Cup, so I think that's interesting. But Italy is such a team that, you know, they haven't been around in the World Cup since 1999. You don't know anything about this team. And all of their players, except for one, are playing in Italy.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I have really noticed. With women's soccer in Italy, they are taking one of those, like, almost meteoric jumps. I mean, I saw, like, for the post on Twitter, like, your big-time stadia just selling out. And it's like, well, wow, they're really taking this seriously. So if they can generate this kind of domestic momentum and carry that sort of pride into France, you're right. This is a very, very dangerous team.
Yeah, and this is a team that there's really not many players over the age of 30. I think counting here, there was about 6, maybe 7. And the last European championship they competed in was the Euro in 2013. So how many people from that team are going to the World Cup? Not many. There's not really many players. There's a lot of players on here that don't even have national team caps. There are, according to this document, there are 3 players that don't even have a cap, and there's a lot of players in either single digits or the low teens. So this is a team that is really testing the waters here. Their goalkeeper, the most caps that a goalkeeper has is 40, and then you have 34, and then you just have 3. So it's very interesting to see this team coming into the World Cup as really the just general dark horse of the World Cup, because you don't really know anything about them.
Yeah, and you don't know anything about them, and from the makeup of the team, they're basically saying, we're going to be playing with house money. You never want to go against a team that's playing with house money, because what always happens? They surprise you, they beat you. Now, for really your 2, as I was saying, the titans of the group, Australia, Brazil, the main themes I get from these teams are NWSL stars, unfinished business. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely not wrong. I think you just hit the nail with the hammer, if that's how that saying goes.
Close enough.
They'll understand.
Because with Australia, everybody knows about Sam Kerr, what she's done just lighting up the league here and playing for her country. She's even better, so it's like, you obviously can't rule them out, but then you've got Brazil, you've got Marta, you've got Formiga, so it's like, they've been here so many times, and you just wonder psychologically, are they thinking, okay, let's just throw everything at it and hope we win, or, okay, enough is enough, let's put our best out there and bring home the trophy.
Yeah, and the crazy thing about both of those teams, both of their defenses are not that great. They're really, really, really not that great. Brazil has struggled for the last couple years finding consistency. Sure, there's been some injuries, but the problem is that, you know, they're so used to being so good that I think they kind of settled for that. And going to Australia for a minute, the last 3 matches they featured in have been losses. The Netherlands, they featured against them twice, and in a combined score, the Netherlands outscored Australia 6-1.
Ooh.
So, not good at all. And those were the Netherlands friendlies were the only friendlies that they played before the World Cup. Meanwhile, with Brazil, you've got a team that hasn't won a match since the 2018 Tournament of Nations.
Oh.
They have lost every single match in 2019. This is a huge wake-up call. I personally believe that their head coach is going to be gone. Veado, he's going to be gone after this World Cup, no matter what happens. I can't see this team making it that far. And honestly, with all of the losses that they had, shoot, I wouldn't even be surprised if it goes maybe Italy, Australia, Jamaica, and then Brazil. I mean, it was. I want to root for Brazil so badly because, Marta, Formiga, you want them to win that World Cup. You want Marta to get her World Cup. But I just don't think it's happening. I don't even know if they'll make it to the knockout round.
Now, worst case scenario that, you just presented. Brazil has a terrible run. They finish last in their group, and they crash out. You already mentioned that Coach Viado gone, but what will this mean for a lot of these top tier, just world class players? Are we gonna see them just retire from international football too? Or are they just gonna not be chosen? How far is Brazil willing to go if the nightmare is real, if it happens?
I think just right now, Brazil is they're kind of doing a United States thing. They're calling in the players just because of their names. There's not really a lot of young players on this team. There's a lot of players that are playing in different areas. There's a lot of countries represented here. They're an older team. They're like the United States. They're an older team. Obviously, I mean, having Formiga is enough said, which is nothing against her because she's still playing at the height with PSG in France. But I just don't think that Brazil is this is not going to be their tournament. This might be Brazil's historically worst tournament in the World Cup. I don't know, but we'll see.
We will. And again, kudos to Formiga, but at the same time, naturally, physiologically, you're limited at 41. So, it's almost making me feel old. And I mean, hopefully this is going to be good news for Jamaica. Have them go on a bit of a run, sneak into the knockout round, because, I would be proud with my Jamaican heritage. That whole country would be proud. Give them a little bit extra to build on this summer.
And they have such an interesting team, too, because they really, obviously, there's the rule of you can switch federations as long as you are within, you can't do, a qualifier with your national team. They had a lot of people recently switch over. Tiffany Cameron used to feature for Canada, and now she's featuring for Jamaica. Chana Matthews joined up. Kayla McCoy is someone really interesting from the Houston Dash. You've got, oh my goodness, Havana Salone, which that one was just, I remember being at the Washington Spirit game about a month and a half ago, and one of the other reporters being genuinely asking Chana Matthews, how is she able to represent Jamaica? And I guess it's through her mother. So it's really interesting to see how many different players they've kind of plucked to do this. And you have some players who are in college. There are 4 players on this roster that are unattached with clubs. So that's interesting in itself. You've got a couple players in Roma, couple in Norway, one in Israel. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. There's a lot of college kids in here, too.
The ultimate hodgepodge. I can definitely get behind this.
It's the Jamaican way, right?
Of course! Bringing in the steel drums and everything. France will get used to it. They're not that bad once you play them correctly. That's a perfect way to kind of end this episode tonight. I mean, I'm getting excited. I know we'll be breaking down a couple more groups tomorrow night, but any final thoughts? Because, I mean, with all of this, I'm just ready to just camp out and watch.
Oh, I'm getting so excited. Friday is almost here. I'm so excited. France, I can't wait to see them. Their first match is they kick everything off, of course, as the hosts against South Korea on Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Everything's going to be on Fox. I'm really, really excited to see all the kits and stuff. I mean, we literally got through all of the kits for my favorite kits. Jamaica, South Africa, and Nigeria. Honestly, my favorite kits. And ironically, and Matt Pollard, our good friend from Last Word on Soccer, my colleague, he had mentioned, oh, they all have green in it. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, yeah, we all picked the green kits. So, gotta love them. Get excited for the World Cup, folks. It is here, and it is exciting, and we're all gonna have fun with it.
There's gonna be some interesting fashion kind of color choices I can watch out for. Alrighty, well, while I ponder that, we're going to end things here. I am Squid Sportshead on Twitter, Rachel.
I am Rachel McCrigger on Twitter, 2 A's, not 1, on the AEL, not the EL.
Yes, very, very important. You think I get mad when people don't spell my name right. Talk to her.
And if you want to argue with me about Ada Hegerberg, go ahead, but read the facts first. I just recently tweeted out a lovely article from CNN with great quotes that were just taken a couple weeks ago. And yes, it is about inequality, folks, so read up.
All right, your homework assignment, which definitely, take a little bit of a deep dive into this, because this is definitely a fundamental issue. It's not going away, and the more we address it and to solve it, imagine how great the World Cup will be even after and when we do.
Oh, it's going to be awesome.
Alright, so we shall convene for the night, reconvene tomorrow, go over a couple more groups, but until then, peace!
See ya!